But yeah, knowing the sport, I mean, the first thing I do if I'm shooting something I'm not familiar with is I look up who did it best, right? So you look up the Neil Lifers and you find the right photographers who've done it better than you'll ever do it, and you look at their pictures and at least know what you ought to be, and what you're striving for. So I think that's just always a nice way to start. What do I want these pictures to look like, and what should they look like?
Yeah.
Um,
And you're absolutely right. Knowing the sport is so important. I had a conversation with David Berkman not too long ago, and he shot a lot of football, a lot of American football, um, in the past, and really interesting conversation. And I remember he was saying like, well, with American football, you need to know where to be before that gameplay actually happens. So you need to be able to think ahead and go like, right, this is about to happen. I'm going to have to position myself there because I'm going to get that shot from that side of the stadium or from that position. And it's just knowing the sport well enough to know that this is about to happen and I got to move myself now is super important. Otherwise, you're just going to be missing the shot all the time.
Yeah, you're gonna be, but you want to be in front of the ball and in front of the player. Exactly. So I mean, what David's doing, he's like, okay, it's third down. He knows the team. He's probably shot the team over and over again, and I shot the 49ers for many years. And so okay, like who they're gonna throw the ball to, or you can anticipate or at least have an idea of what. And there's nothing like knowing the sport. So you run down and you put yourself in position for the picture you want to make. And then it's luck, right? Because sports photography is luck, and you work hard for your luck, but then when the play does happen, you don't miss. You certainly try not to. So it's all of that. And that's what makes it so fun. But yeah, there's nothing like knowing the sport and knowing the team.
Yeah, and knowing the participants. There's a funny thing that happens in amateur boxing a lot is you have, especially a lot of the time with the guys. So what happens is they are like super eager and super pumped up. They've got to last 3 rounds unless they get knocked out. But basically that's the idea. They fight 3 rounds, and they get into it with all cylinders steaming. Like, it's like super high energy in the first round. And I already, at that point, when the first round starts like that, I know they're going to be tired as heck by the end of round 2. And I know I'm not going to have to worry about the movement of the action too much, because I know I'm going to get some much calmer shots in the third round because they're done. They're not going to be, nobody's fit enough to last through 3 rounds at that sort of high energy level.
They wear that headgear with the amateur. They wear the headgear like that protects their face. Yeah, I shot amateur too. The first time I did it afterwards, I came home and I told my son, I go, the pictures weren't good. They're wearing all this headgear. You can't see their faces. And he's like, Mom, do you know what would happen to them if they didn't wear that? Because my son knows sports. I was like, oh yeah, I suppose that's true. But the headgear.
So, I mean, it's true. Despite the events that I shoot are really well controlled, and they're as safe as they could ever be. There's a medical team ringside. There's an ambulance outside. They're very, very safety conscious. But with every event, something goes wrong at some point. I've seen so many knockouts, despite all the headgear and everything. I've seen people taken out of the ring, put in an ambulance and driven off to hospital. I mean, all of that happens. And of course, I always wonder, why would you put yourself through that, like voluntarily? What's up with that? But boxing's boxing, where they hit each other, So.
And it's a great sport. I mean, the photos can really be beautiful, and just even what the atmosphere is. If you've got a good crowd, just the geometry and the structure of the ring. If you can find an up position and shoot down, it makes it so interesting to see all of that and the colors. And I think there's a lot to it. And the details of boxing is interesting. A boxing gym, I've shot in boxing gyms a lot, and I love that, especially if you get a gritty one. There's a lot of pictures to be made in a boxing gym.
Yeah, boxing is super interesting. The other thing, it's the same organization. They do boxing events and cage fighting events. And cage fighting events are they're hilarious because you always think, oh yeah, cage fighting, there's going to be a lot of action. And but the truth of the matter is, the bigger the guy is, the sluggisher the fight. And it's like, I always think like, okay, there's 2 guys hugging on the floor. I'm not really sure There's a good shot in that.
Yeah, I shot high school wrestling. It took me forever to like figure out, but the lighter weight ones certainly had more movement, and but figuring all that, yeah. And when you get to that higher weight classes, it's a completely different game. So yeah, same thing with boxing. But
what was it? What was the transition like for you? Like moving on from, let's say, amateur sports to like, to shooting in big stadiums and shooting like big national teams. What was that like for you?
I mean, the interesting thing for me is I was doing both simultaneously because I connected with Michael Zagaris pretty early on in my sports part of my career. I was able to be shooting the Oakland A's and the San Francisco 49ers while I was also shooting these youth sports. So I was sort of learning on a big field so I could get my little gig done. And the combination was really fun for me. I mean, the first time I walked onto a big field, I mean, I would think it's probably the same for everybody. You think everything's a picture, right? You're on a Major League Baseball field and you overshoot like crazy. Like, oh, look, there's a player standing there. I need 30 frames per second of him doing absolutely nothing, There's the mascot. Here's another 60 pictures, and then you have an editing nightmare when you go home because and then you're seeing this player that's just standing there like a tree growing out of a baseball field. And it's like, why did I need 30 pictures of this or even one? So, I think that excitement, of being, everything looks interesting and is almost overwhelming. And it takes a while to like calm that down and make pictures and say, okay, now, I've got to shoot the game and I've got to pay attention and just treat it like anything else, and that's really, I think as the experience goes on, shooting a World Series is no different than shooting a Little League game. Then once the game starts, it starts and they play the game, and the Little League game goes 6 innings and the World Series goes, 9 innings and you hope for more. But you're just doing the same thing. They're playing the same game, and the more it's all the same. It's very formulaic. It's almost boring in that way. Not boring for me, but it's a formula, and it's and the more relaxed you are, and it's preparation. Then you're going to make the pictures, and it's having a plan. And every game I shoot, I know the pictures I want to make or have an idea. It doesn't always work out, of course, but there is a plan. Right up until the end of the game, okay, it's about, this is who's winning, who's losing, where do I want to stand, what do I want to capture, where am I going to be pointing my camera, what lens am I going to be using, and all of those things are happening before the game is over. So, okay, I'm going to be on this player, I'm going to be at the end of the game, I'll get the last play, I'm going to turn because I want this guy celebrating or this guy in defeat. And where my position is, of course, if it's a big game, you don't have a choice, right? You have your spot is your spot. You don't get to move. So then you got to make the best picture from where you are. But if you do get to move, then you want to be in a position. So you think about that, not at the last minute, like, oh, the game's about to end and start running. No, you get over there way in advance and know what you want to shoot and what lens you're going to shoot it with. And then all those little things that are not so little, are your batteries. You have a fresh battery in there, or your card. You don't want to start shooting a celebration and your card is full, right? So all of those things that you learn and you prepare for. And then when you're prepared and you get there early and you have a plan, it's so relaxing.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.